Stefan Cern interviews Sally Susman. She's the Chief Corporate Affairs Officer at pharma giant Pfizer. She knows a thing or two about communication to a workforce under pressure. I think we can all agree on that. And in her new book, Breaking Through, she offers some powerful and practical advice on the subtle but vital art of communication. Stick with us on Drucker Forum TV.
Thank you, Justin. That's very efficient. That saves me from repeating the introduction I had ready. And I'm delighted to be joined by Sally Susman from Pfizer. Thanks so much for being here in Vienna.
Thank you, Stefan. Great to be with you.
Well, we've got your handsome book there on the table, Breaking Through. And as you explained quite early on in the book, that was a kind of challenge you set to yourself. And I suppose in the wider sense, the corporation, but in particular to yourself in terms of communication and getting messages through to the organization and out into the world. What did you mean by breaking through? What do you mean by breaking through?
Oh, thank you for asking. And if we go back in our minds to March of 2020, it was a very scary time, very different from today where we're enjoying being together in Vienna. And Pfizer CEO, Albert Bourla, my boss, made a breakthrough pledge to the world that he would bring forward or try to bring forward a vaccine by the end of the year. This was an incredible ambition, scientifically never done before. And I felt that if he had that much courage, I should have a breakthrough ambition for myself. And that really, in my role as Chief Corporate Affairs Officer at Pfizer, that really was to try to change the reputation of Big Pharma. And I felt this was my breakthrough moment. And that if we were going to have this ambition, that I would need to work very differently, which I did, and we may talk about. And in the end, now, Pfizer is a top 10 global brand, according to Fortune magazine, a very trusted company. And through this breaking through, I wanted to write this book to share those lessons with as many people as I can.
A lot of lessons, and not just at Pfizer, but through a career of some distinction in comms roles in other corporations. And you talk about being intentional. If you're going to break through, that means being intentional about it. And it's a word I think we hear quite a lot now in business, but what do you mean by intentional?
Thank you. So often, people don't think about their communications. And in fact, it's the premise of my book, that the difference between a good leader and one who is a game changer are those who are amazing communicators. And rule number one of communications is to be intentional. So my intention during the pandemic was to reintroduce Pfizer as a company that cared, that wanted to make a difference in the lives of ordinary people. And I've taken this intentionality thing pretty far. And so now, whenever I have a communication, whether it's talking to my parents and trying to be patient, or talking to my daughter and trying not to be judgmental, or meeting with you today and being here at the Drucker Forum to try and hopefully share some insights. I think that clarity of being intentional makes a big difference.
And what you were doing was very ambitious, as you say, because we're in, as you discuss at some length, and very interestingly in the book, we're in this noisy, sometimes hostile and aggressive world of communications where breaking through, or cutting through, we also sometimes say, getting messages through, being heard, is really difficult. And yet you use fact, you use data, you use clarity, which some cynics and some pessimistic people say is a difficult route to go down, but tell us how you made it work.
Thank you. Data, facts, science, truth are all very, very important things. And you're a journalist, so I don't have to convince you on truth. And the pursuit of truth and clarity and science and facts has never been more important than it is today. And in the rollout of the vaccine, we had wonderful data from our clinical trials, from real-world evidence studies that we were doing around the world. And we had many, many experts. Our chief scientific officer, and being able to work with health officials from around the globe. But I had a learning experience during the pandemic that is that those things were essential but insufficient to do the full job of communicating. And what surprised me was some very old-fashioned tactics were extremely important. good old-fashioned storytelling. People, grandmothers who told the other grandmothers, I got to see my granddaughter because I'm vaccinated. Or college students who were able to return to campus life because they had the vaccine. And these stories, they were all over social media. They became, quite viral. And the really influential storytellers were less the politicians or the sports heroes or the rock stars, and much more the friend, the neighbor, the teacher, the preacher, the girl next door, had a kind of a intimacy and credibility that's very important, especially when people are anxious during times of crisis.
And you also rose above the noise. You didn't sink to the level of the critics, the people that some of us call anti-vaxxers. That's not even a phrase I think you use as a corporation. You didn't go to that level. You stayed high. You stayed polite. You talk about the importance of manners and civility, which again, sometimes feel under pressure. But tell us about your approach to manners and good taste in a way, and good judgment in communication.
This is one of my favorite topics. I could talk about this for hours, and you're right. I don't call people anti-vaxxers. It's not a word I use in regular conversation because I think it's othering. It's finger-pointing. It's creating more distance between us as human beings and not less. I tried very hard, as did my colleagues, to answer questions, to be available, to understand that, having someone put a medicine, a vaccine into their body requires an inordinate amount of trust. And earning that trust is a daily thing. And if we can do it in a gracious way, in a kind way, I think it's more effective. And it's why I'm very interested in the theme of this conference, creative resilience.
Yes.
Because I think part of the creative part is being a bit more humble and a bit more gentle in our communications approach.
That's very, very interesting, because as a journalist, of course, we have this maybe slightly tired approach. No doubt some media were frustrated that Pfizer Corporation was not prepared to get into a fight with some of these people. They wanted you to talk about anti-vaxxers and so on, but as I say, you kind of avoided it or sidestepped that and just spoke in your own language.
I'm passionate about this point, and you're right. There were many times when your friends and colleagues in the media.
Nice chaps.
Yes, nice chaps.
And chapesses, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
They wanted us to talk about a political issue, or wasn't this president wrong, or that prime minister inaccurate.
Right.
And there's no real place for politics, I believe, in business. There's lots of room for policy. There's lots of room for discussion and debate. But political accusations, name-calling, if anything, it might give you a short-term number of clicks, but it doesn't really engender trust and commitment among people.
You also offer, for the cover price of a book, some high-powered, valuable consultancy, really, for corporations, for chief communications officers, corporate affairs officers, on a kind of recipe for when to get engaged in an issue and when to avoid it. Does it fit in with your purpose, your values? Is it relevant? Does it affect your customers, employees? Tell us a bit about your sort of checklist of when to engage or not.
This is the number one most frequently asked question that I receive, because it's on everyone's mind. When should a CEO or a company weigh in on an issue of public discourse? And there are so many issues happening now: climate, income inequality. And it's easy to be uncertain or confused or dragged in to the wrong discussion. My colleagues at Pfizer asked me several years ago, how will we know if we should get involved? And my company, like most companies, is very metric driven. We have a metric for financial investment. We have a metric for advancing a compound down the scientific pipeline. But when it came to this issue, should we speak out, we didn't have a metric. And I think people thought it was whatever Sally thinks, which is not good.
Not bad.
No, not good.
Not good enough.
Not good enough.
Okay.
And so we worked up a 5-question framework.
Right.
And just very briefly, Stefan, as you say, one, does it relate to our purpose? At Pfizer's purpose, breakthroughs that change patients' lives, it gives us a wide berth to discuss healthcare, anything to do with health and well-being. But if you speak out on every issue, you lose your agency. 2, how does it impact our most important stakeholders? For us, that's patients and employees, but every organization has its own stakeholders. 3, how does it relate to our values? Not our politics, but our values.
Right,
We have
right.
4, courage, excellence, equity, and joy. But it's not about being Democratic or Republican or conservative or liberal. It's really about values. 4, and this one is my favorite, what are our choices here? Because too often, people in my field, myself at times, are just reactive, defensive, and a reporter's calling on deadline, somebody needs a petition signed by the end of the day.
Yes.
I kind of reject all that and say, let's just write out in our own voice, with our own pen, how we feel. We issue it to our employees first, and then we put it on our website. And it's kind of taken the madness out of, and the chaos
So the
out.
employees hear it first, they don't get it from another source.
Exactly.
That's very important.
And then the 5th and final question is simply, what is the cost of our silence, and what is the price of silence? And
Right.
there are some issues in the world, I believe, racism, violence in the schools, that require good corporate citizens to speak out.
Right, not being a bystander on the right issue. But you've alluded to it there. You take a pause. You take a pause to think. And you also talk about that in everyday communications, phone calls, email, taking a pause. Now, in this hurry, faster, instant world where we beep and click and zap and want things immediately, sometimes we forget that, as you say, what are our choices? Our choice is also to stop and think, maybe, before we speak and write things.
I believe in the pause. And as you say, a pause can be very uncomfortable in our world, where people expect immediate responses.
Yes.
I have made most of my mistakes, and my mistakes are detailed in my book.
They are.
If you want to read about my mistakes, they're all there. I make most of my mistakes when I'm rushing. I actually know someone who lost his career over an ill-conceived social media posting that I'm
Yeah.
sure he didn't think about.
Yeah.
Often I advise people when talking to journalists, just because the journalist is quiet doesn't mean you need to keep talking.
That's
It's a trick
absolutely
people
right.
like you use on people like
You
me.
got me.
A pause is a powerful thing.
Oh, silence, absolutely. I was told to use silence. When I was at journalism school, we were told to use silence. We were told to wait because they'll keep talking. Also, negotiating fees.
Yes.
Never respond to the first number. You know, just let it sit there and then go, well, we could maybe go a bit higher. It's a fantastic book, Sally. I really enjoyed reading it. All your tales of what you've learnt over 3 decades, a bit more than 3 decades, as you say. Mentors, that's the other thing you said we really lost in lockdown, and which we're enjoying being together again, thanks to vaccines. The need to be together, the need to huddle, the need for grown-up people to share what they've seen, but also for younger people to say what they're seeing, right? So getting together is another big part of your communication method.
I love to mentor people, and I find at this stage of my career, it's a big part of my job.
Right.
Teaching others. I have a colleague here with me today because I like to be with people and roll up our sleeves and solve a problem together. I missed that terribly during the pandemic. And you just can't do it on Zoom, in my mind, in my view. It's really about being in the room where it happened.
Yes.
So it was during the pandemic that I wrote the book and tried to pour the heart of my mentorship into the book. And in my field, corporate affairs and communications, there's not a singular degree. You know, you don't need a medical degree or a law degree. You need a set of experiences that one largely gets through apprenticeship. And so I feel that it's my job and my passion, my mission to apprentice people in this work. And I've tried to put as much of it as I can into breaking through.
So the last thought, really, better communications, people saying what they mean and then doing what they say they're going to do, so the communication is verified in that sense, or validated. Is this how we get back to some greater sense of trust and calm? Because, again, being the journalist, I can put the pessimistic thought to you that it's a noisy world out there. It's an election year in the US and elsewhere. And there's not a lot of trust about, there's not a lot of trust in the air in our communications even. Can we get there? I mean, you seem to have achieved a lot with Pfizer and with the book, but
Oh, but
are
we
you
must
hopeful?
get there. We must get
Right.
there. The final chapter of my book is about seeking harmony. And I feel strongly, Stefan, that harmony doesn't mean you and I are going to agree on everything, but rather that we can live together and have the skills and the muscles as leaders and communicators to disagree agreeably, to remain open to the possibility that maybe, just maybe, I'm not right, but you are. And I feel this ability, Adam Grant describes and defines harmony as the pleasing arrangement of different sounds. We need to create an environment where we have the pleasing arrangement of different sounds.
Great note to end on. Thanks so much, Sally Susman.
Thank you.